Hey there, and welcome back to my final 0.3 prep video for Path of Exile 2. This is going to be my league start, and if you're watching this video, it means that the patch has dropped. Hopefully that avoids GGG from nerfing the rest of this build, because they've been on an absolute nerf rampage, which I believe is one of the nerf models. And so it's early enough that, most people will definitely, if they bothered looking, will have seen it before finishing campaign. And it can be done with 4 different ascendancies, which I'll explain later. So it is a crossbow build. I did run it. I've been running it for the last 2 days on stream. So we did a theory craft stream. I crafted it on stream, got the basic framework of it. Yesterday, I just had the gear in my stash, like just threw on all the gear in my stash to make it. And it was really designed to be like, these 2 items are like have 0 damage added basically to the build. But I needed to get accuracy up to try and match closer to what we'd have in 0.3. So like these gloves have accuracy. This ring does have a good number of flats, like it is T1 flats with a lot of accuracy. So again, the build does need accuracy, so it is to be considered. I don't know the exact break point of hard accuracy, plus it's changing in the next patch, so just be aware of that. So I did throw on like 2 really no damage here, and then 1 damage ring with accuracy again to boost that accuracy up, because I didn't have just like a standard T1 accuracy ring without it. So as you can see, we have Last Lament, we have Coward's Legacy, we have Starkanja. Astramentus is really not required. It's actually worse than if you have a good rare amulet, but again, we're talking about league start. So one quick thing to note is they did mention that in Act 4, there would be a guaranteed nameless seer on one of the islands. So that means you'll be able to potentially pick out an Astra in campaign, which is wild. So if you don't know, nameless seer is a very rare map spawn. So normally you would get it as a node on your atlas. And when you go to the map, it's all it is you walk in and it's just 1 NPC, and you can pick 1 unique for free from his shop. So he will give you a random assortment, and you can just pick it and take it for free. So they said there's going to be 1 guaranteed in Act 4, and Astramentus can drop starting in Act 2 at level 24. So it is very possible that there's going to be a lot of Astramentus on the market. I mean, most people are probably going to use it to start leveling for the same purposes that we're using it here, because it's just a nice stat boost. You meet all your requirements, you get some life, and then if you are on lower on the tree, then you can go get Jack of all trades. But again, really not required, and ideally you swap out the Astra later. But we do have 4 uniques in the build. And in 0.3, they're going to allow you to lock. So this dual Last Lament thing is not going to happen anymore. So, what are we doing? Well, we are playing a Permafrost Bolt. So I was testing between Galvanic and Permafrost before, and it's going to be worth testing because both of these are changing. So Permafrost is getting a slight debuff in damage, but incredibly high freeze buildup, while Galvanic is getting a damage buff. So it will be still worth testing in the upcoming patch between the 2, like when we're worth trying it. And I still think that both are going to be used in the build. All right, so here's the tree, and I do have a POB for it, but I'm not going to link it, purely for the fact that the tree is going to be changing a lot. So all you need to know is that we are picking up projectile damage nodes, and then we're also going to be using a companion, and then otherwise you're just picking up like any projectile damage nodes that you can see. Giant Slayer is amazing. And yeah, pick up some pen nodes. We are going to be doing both cold and lightning in the build. If you get a Last Lament, you will be doing like 99% cold. If you are doing a rare crossbow, which the build does work with a rare crossbow and has some very fun interactions, more fun than Requiem in my opinion, then you will also have some lightning from Galvanic Shards. You will most likely want to spec Galvanic Shards. So, the very, very basic, the Last Lament is easier to run and understand because Last Lament has an effect on it. Sacrifice 300 life to not consume the last bolt when firing. So this works with, well, I mean, Permafrost and Galvanic. Galvanic is going to be taking a nerf. Well, not a nerf. It will have like 80% more damage, but it will only load one bolt. So paired with Last Lament, both Permafrost and Galvanic, every time you shoot, you will consume 300 life. And this is the core of the build, is that this will proc Coward's Legacy so that you will be on low life. This will then proc Starkonja's, and also on the tree, you'll have access to stuff like Killer Instinct. 50% increased attack damage when on low life. So there's a few things cascading down as you are consuming life. That being said, if you just like spam shots, the leech on the crossbow is not enough to sustain. So that's where the Amazon Ascendancy could be used, because then you'll leech off of Elemental, in which case that will offset a lot of the sacrificing life while you're shooting these bolts. Otherwise, you will end up having to press your life flask regularly if you're doing this. There is also a new support coming out that will give you, every time you roll, will reload your crossbow bolt and give you 3 additional extra. So instead of loading 1, you'll have 4, and rolling is a lot faster than reloading in a lot of cases, especially if you're using Last Lament with reload speed. So you could do things like that to manage how many bolts you have in, and whatnot. Otherwise, you will start consuming a lot of HP, but it does work. So that's the core of it, is that you're just going to be walking around, shooting. You might have to just press your flask every now and again to recover some life, depending on what your life leech is at. But overall, that's the goal of it. So you go around, you shoot Permafrost or Galvanic, depending on what feels better, and then you patch, and you kill stuff. Then you get to a boss, you get to a unique. Now what's going to happen is that we have some very bueno buffs. One is that, the big one is that we have high velocity rounds. High velocity rounds got a nice buff. No longer consumes fully broken armor. Instead, hitting a fully broken enemy will apply a debuff to that enemy, which causes your attack hits against that enemy to deal additional physical damage equal to 5% of the physical damage dealt by high velocity round. So yes, we are going to be scaling high velocity rounds here. And how are we doing that? What our rotation is going to look like is that we're going to be using armor penetrating rounds to break the armor of the enemy. Armor penetrating rounds just has really high fire rate, lots of bolts loaded, and just breaks a flat amount. So it doesn't even matter how much it's doing. We're not relying on stuff like break 15% of physical, which is the support called Splinter. You can still put Splinter on armor piercing rounds for just a little bit more armor break, but overall armor piercing rounds, like if you need to break like 20k armor, it's going to take like 5 bolts, and it loads something 20 something bolts. But this obviously means attack speed is decently relevant, and this goes again for both Last Lament and the rare crossbow version. So we're going to have high velocity rounds. So we're going to do armor piercing into high velocity rounds. So you're going to go armor piercing, you break the armor, then we're going to use permafrost bolts. We're going to use permafrost, the permafrost bolt, so that we can freeze whatever enemy. With permafrost plus 500% increased freeze buildup, it should be relatively trivial to freeze bosses. So we're going to permafrost to freeze the boss. Once the boss is frozen, we are going to switch to high velocity rounds. The high velocity round is going to consume freeze. So we're going to use the support called Biting Cold to consume freeze. So the support will consume freeze, and that's a 1.5x multi. That's a pure multi. Then we're also going to have close combat, deliberation, brutality, and heft, because we're really just trying to push that physical damage up. Then to top it all off, you're going to be running Elemental Invocation with Snap and Arc. The Snap is not relevant to this in particular, because so Snap will be in mapping if you're using a rare crossbow, but Arc will, so you're going to generate freeze, it will proc Elemental Invocation, like you will have enough energy. Once you're ready to burst the boss, you pop Elemental Invocation, Arc comes out, and shocks the boss. Arc has increased shock values in 0.3, so that's always a nice thing. Obviously, with more spirit, you're going to run Overwhelming Presence, and if you guessed, the part of the reason you want to consume at the same time is for Shard Scavenger. So Shard Scavenger gives you a buff that gives you unlimited ammo. So this is going to be used especially for rare crossbows. Shard Scavenger is incredibly important. So when I was saying this build works with rare and not, so if you're using a rare crossbow, your mapping is just go around, Permafrost Bolt, and then when you freeze an enemy, you pop Elemental Invocation, you consume the freeze on the enemy, now Shard Scavenger kicks in, and you just go with that, and now you have unlimited ammo for like 4 or 5 seconds, depending on how you built your tree, which, because it does scale off of skill effectuation. And then for bossing, you're going to do that whole rotation. The high velocity round is going to pierce and give you that buff, the buff that we're talking about, 5%, take 5% of the high velocity round damage and add it to each hit. The nice part here is that Permafrost deals 13 projectiles, has 13 little hits. Each of those will get 5%. So let's say 10 of them hit, you're getting 50% of the damage of high velocity rounds for every Permafrost bolt that you're putting in. You have unlimited ammo. So you don't even have to deal with reloads or anything. You're going to sit there and just spam Permafrost bolts if you're using the rare crossbow. You're just going to spam Permafrost bolts and deal a chunk of the high velocity rounds on every hit. Or if Galvanic ends up better, Galvanic has a much better attack speed than than Permafrost. So it might be worth it to go Galvanic. It also has a higher base damage as well versus Permafrost. So this is where that Galvanic versus Permafrost is going to come in. Most likely, if you're using a rare crossbow and you can fit it in your space, you'll use the Galvanic. Then boss should die at that point. You can also use Frostbomb to have an exposure effect as well. So you can always drop a Frostbomb while you're, let's say, doing your high velocity rounds before you start applying. And if you're using Last Lament, Requiem is amazing for boss killing. So you can pop Requiem and do the same thing. Requiem has very, very, very strong scaling with levels. So like a level 19 Requiem will have 891% per shot, and we're dealing like 10 plus shots per second. So the high velocity rounds will help this damage. It's not absolutely required, but it will help this damage. And yesterday I showed that even with like garbage relics were no flats on one ring, no flats on the on the gloves. And again, we don't have access to the new supports, and hopefully new stuff on the tree is going to be helpful for damage. So I do expect that it's going to be no problem early league, like day 2, day 3, to be using this build to kill stuff. The only problem is we cannot test with high velocity rounds at this point, so unfortunately, that's to be determined. But this build is going to be using either rare or Last Lament if you can get one. Now let's talk about the survivability. If you notice down here, we're at 93%, so it's great. We are stacking Wind Dancer, and if you go the Deadeye version, then you're also going to have Tailwind, and this is what your survivability looks like. So you have a Companion now. Companion can have the Loyalty Support Gem. The Loyalty Support Gem will then give 10% of your damage that you would normally take to your minion, assuming the minion is alive. Starkanja's adds another 15% on top. So we add another 15%. You could technically go to 18 with a Krangle Divine. We're just going to say 15, the base value, which means that from, let's say, a 10,000 damage hit, you would be taking from that 0.75. But wait, there's more. Tailwind then also gives you 3% less damage taken per Tailwind. So, Tailwind caps at 10. So you would have a 30% damage reduction on the next step. Now we're already down to roughly half. Now, because of deflect, and because we're able to so easily hit very high evade values, I assume that it's going to be somewhat trivial to get very good deflect values. And if your deflect is not good, because we have such good evade chance, then glancing blows, the buff to glancing blows, I mean, it's a nerf if you want block, it's a buff if you want deflect. Glancing blows now provides chance to evade is unlucky, chance to deflect is lucky. It no longer provides block chances doubled. So anyway, let's say you deflect this attack. Now you're going to have another 40% DR. We're going from 10,000 damage down to 3,000 damage. So if this was like a 10,000 damage fire hit, then you would then further reduce this by your 75% res and only take 787 fire damage off of 10,000 damage hit. Again, assuming your minion is alive and you have tailwind stacks and you deflect, you would take 787 damage. This is on a build that would have over 90% evade chance as well, which they also just buffed prior to me recording this video. So, and I'll talk about lucky, unlucky, and lucky as well in just a second. So we have evasion. I just talked about it. Evasion now works on all hits except boss skills that have a red flash. Evasion formula has been adjusted to lower the percentage of hits that will be evaded. So basically they changed the formula. It'll be harder to evade now. But I assume that with some investment, it will not really change too much for us. Because we can add like Wind Dancer, between Wind Dancer, Tailwind, Starkonjas, stuff like that. We are gaming on this one. So, and just to show you, like, we have a pretty bleh. We have decent evasion on this, and terrible suffixes. And now, when I start consuming life, there we go. You can see that I'm still very good on life, 91% evasion, and we've got I don't even have qual on this. This is pretty mediocre, and then not really much evasion to write home about here. This does have some evasion, but normally, like, you would probably want flats here, so you would lose some evasion here. You would maybe gain some here from having qual, a better chest piece, and then maybe boots with some evasion. So that's what your defensive layer looks like. So again, I don't think it's going to be hard to hit like very good evasion values. And that's not even on Deadeye, by the way. I'm at 91% not on Deadeye, not with Tailwind. So yeah, I don't think this is going to be terribly difficult to hit good evasion values and good deflect values. So our 10,000 damage hit comes down to 787, assuming everything else lines up. Let's talk about lucky versus unlucky. So it says your chance to evade is unlucky, your chance to deflect is lucky. And how that works is that if you have a 95% chance to evade, that means every time the monster hits you, you have to roll evasion twice. So the monster rolls with advantage. And that looks like this. So you do 0.95, your chance to evade squared, because you have to do this twice. Your effective evade chance only goes down to 90.25. Which is, we barely lose any evade chance. Like, we are still over 90% to dodge the damage fully and not even have to worry about our damage reduction steps. So, and then otherwise, we can go, for deflect, let's say we have 75% deflect chance. Every video I do on this, I change the value, so I don't know it off by heart. So we have a 75% chance to deflect. That means the monster rolls its chance to pierce twice. So you have 0.25 squared. It only has a 6% chance, 6.25% chance to bypass your deflect. So we can be running like 90+% evasion rating and effectively like 94% deflect chance, assuming that you can get your actual deflect, your normal deflect rating before lucky to around 75%, which really should not be difficult unless they significantly reduced the scaling of rating to chance. Obviously, monsters can have be accurate, like rares can have accurate, which will play with this as well. But again, this is not even including the fact that you can maybe just throw a flash grenade, blind the enemy, use blind on, let's say, armor piercing rounds if you're gonna use it here and there. There's things that you can do to also further reduce this. Now let's talk about the ascendancies. Obviously, I ran it on stream with Gemling because originally I was either going to play tactician support or Gemling, so I figure start mercenary. In the reality, like between Deadeye and Gemling, there's not too much difference. Both of them have their pros and cons and will be relevant. Gemling actually saves 2 passive points with the current tree, but this will probably change. Let's be fair. This will probably change, and I will post a max roll on this once we know the full changes and I have a chance to sit down and write that or like post it. So all of these things will change. But in terms of like the most effectiveness, I would lean between Deadeye and Gemling. Like right now, Deadeye is because I might end up going Pathfinder support. So like both of these are like good for the ascend as an ascend for this build as they are. Deadeye would want called shots to apply mark, so you would apply freezing mark. Point blank gives you a 1.2x multi if they're close, which you are using a shotgun skill. Requiem, I mean, you don't have to be close, but if you're bossing, the arena is probably small enough, just walk up and kill them. Then we have Gathering Winds for Tailwind. This is a given. Movement speed, skill speed, and damage reduction. So this is how I would build the Deadeye. Gemling, I would take implants plus integrated efficiency. Gem Studded is getting buffed. To me, it's a very nice buff. And you can actually get all 3 effects. So you can even get stuff like monsters will not deal crit damage bonus to you, which is insane. Which is actually insane. 30% less cost of skills and whatnot. So Gemling like looks insane. Plus this is adding skill speed, skill damage. Both of those are really nice. So yeah, this is amazing. Requiem does scale pretty well with levels, so that's part of this. The only downside is that qual is not super important. The other thing that you could kind of do is drop the +2 and take infusion here, which gives you more max res per socketed support gem. This will help with a lot with elemental damage, but will not be as strong as Tailwind for physical damage. So you know that's part of the trade-off. Tailwind will just work everywhere, including physical, while this will not help on physical. Obviously, you can get Catalysis unless they change it. You can get Catalysis to convert 5% of physical to a random element, which you will then block more of here. So again, there's pros and cons. Gemling does have a lot of quality of life as well. Less movement speed penalty here, less cost of skills, and you just don't take crit damage bonus from monsters. So like there's definitely some nice stuff there. Same with Deadeye. Other options would be Amazon. This is specifically if you are going Last Lament. Mystic Harvest, Life Leech recovers based on your elemental damage as well as physical damage. Because we're relying on like lots of small fast hits, Open Wound is really good. These are both really good for both Requiem, especially for Requiem, because Requiem is just like doing lots of well, it's not small hits, but like just constant high damage hits until the boss dies for 12 seconds. So these will work really well with Requiem. And then you have the option of like Stalking Panther or Asmiri Brew. Stalking Panther could be interesting as well for this. Mathematically, Stalking Panther is a really strong node. The only problem is, since we're using Starkonjas, then already 1 slot from this is hurt. And then if we are then further adding on, if we are then further adding into the mix gloves with flat damages instead of like evasion, then this will not be useful. Unfortunately, Elemental Infusion will probably not be that great with this build. Critical Strike could be good if you stack enough accuracy. But right now, like, because Last Lament has such a bad crit chance. I'm not relying on crits in the build, so I have not built any crit in here. So yeah, those are some options. Also, you could technically go towards penetrate. So if you do get a good rare crossbow with very high, like good flat physical and good accuracy, penetrate will scale that very nicely as well. So those are some options that you have for ascendancies. And then something I forgot to mention earlier, to get your life down. So if you are using a rare crossbow, so instead of consuming life with the Last Lament, you would just put life tap support. You would just put life tap support into your let's say mortar, and you just drop the mortar once, lose enough HP, and then for the rest of the map, now you have your low life condition fulfilled. So hopefully you found that interesting. I was really excited when, you know, like doing this and seeing the numbers for the evasion and everything coming out. The amount of damage reduction that we're getting out of this feels really nice. Like, we effectively get 69%. Yes, exactly. 69% damage reduction, which is fantastic. It honestly it honestly looks amazing. And again, I did try it in Sekhemas and did carries in Sekhemas with the Requiem version of what we just spoke about. So, hopefully you enjoyed. Will you run it? Let me know down in the comments. Again, I'm not posting this until GGG drops that update, drops the 0.3 officially, and then I will start building towards it. Hope you enjoyed. I will be streaming on Twitch and maybe on YouTube for 0.3 launch and all through the weekend, and I will hopefully see you there. Ciao.